If you didn't understand before, I hope you understand now. Because you're now listening to the We Talkin Podcast brought to you by Island Girl Team. This podcast, we are literally talking about every and anything with your girl, Kamilah Gumbs. So subscribe from wherever you get your podcast and get ready to talk. Welcome to episode 7 of the We Talkin Podcast. And for today's episode, we have special guest member of Parliament, Sarah Wescot Williams. And we're going to talk to her about her journey in politics as well as current events on St. Martin. I am your host, Kamilah Gumbs. And once again, I'm joined by my friend, Nian Fleming. So before we get into today's episode, I just have a quick biography on MP Sarah Wescot Williams. So Sarah A. Wescot Williams has been a notable player in St. Martin politics since 1991 and a public servant person, to use her own words, for more than 4 decades. Her political career saw her ascend in 1994 to the leadership of the oldest political party on the island, the Democratic Party, following the footsteps of the legendary late Dr. A. Claude Watty. In the former structure of Island Territory, she served as a member of the Executive Council of the Territory. Sarah also served in the Island Council for 15 years, and during 1998 and 1999, she was also a member of the Netherlands Antillean Parliament. On October 10, 2010, she was appointed the first Prime Minister of the country, St. Martin, and had the responsibility for the Ministry of General Affairs, in charge of departments such as Judicial and Legal Affairs, Interior Affairs and Kingdom Relations, Foreign Affairs and Public Service, Disaster Management, and National Security. In that capacity, she represented the country in regional bodies and chaired the Regional HIV/AIDS Program and the Regional European Development Programs. During those early years of the new status, the focus was on laying the foundations for the new public service, making the mostly new organic laws available in the English language, establishing the St. Martin House and the S4 student organization, and providing leadership in the uncharted waters of country status. It was an intense period and of putting the theory into practice. Our political blueprint, if there was such, was a mosaic of parts from here and there and elsewhere. Sarah was again elected to Parliament in 2014. She has served as the President of Parliament and has initiated committees of Parliament for electoral reform and parliamentary integrity. She also holds an honors associate degree in business and finance, a bachelor's degree in public administration, and a master's degree in public administration. And as an advocate for lifelong learning, so she herself counts herself a array of achievements, certificates in law administration organization, leadership and public finance, art of mindfulness, journalism, studies of ideology, sustainable development, COVID-19 response strategies, and communications. And she was recently appointed of the member of council advice to the United Nations Association for the Netherlands. So please welcome Miss Sarah A. Wescot Williams. But yes, MP Wescot, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It is my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go straight into the discussion. So firstly, we want to congratulate you on receiving the Living Legend Award from Quality Politics this last week in honor of International Women's Day. And from that, we want to ask you, what inspired you to join the male-dominant political arena? And how has your experience throughout the decades has now cemented you as the official matriarch figure within our political community?
Well, the more traditional answer to that question would be something of the following. Well, I had to fight my way through, and with all the males around me, but it wasn't really that way. That's why I said that would be the more traditional answer to your question. And I didn't view myself as a female amongst the male politicians. Mm-hmm. I view myself as a politician amongst the other politicians. it is a fact, though, that the men, the politicians, they had, especially back then, when we did not have the kind of technology like we have today. And their modus operandi in terms of politics was not always the way that I would conduct politics. What do I mean with that? Sometimes, in order to stay abreast, in order to be part of the discussion, hear what's happening, etc., I would have to go to, just to give an example, a cigar lounge. That would not be a choice of mine, but that's where a lot of the discussions took place. And so you needed to adapt certain ways to cope with it and make sure that you're not left behind. You're part of it as it go along. So the kind of experience of, oh my God, I as a female and poor me kind of thing. No, that was not my experience. But that I constantly had to be alert to maneuver myself in that environment. That yes.
That makes sense. That actually does make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Thank you.
So with that, we could go more into you being one of the leaders within the Democratic Party and as it being one of our historical parties. So can you kind of explain the party's political philosophy and how it has contributed to political history in St. Martin?
I was fortunate, and I'll tell you why I consider it being fortunate in a while, but I was fortunate to have taken over a party that was credited for the modern day economic successes of St. Martin. There is a history behind that, like there is a history behind every story. Right. And the history behind that, and I'm sure that both of you have this knowledge in terms of our history as St. Martin. And for many years, we were sort of left on our own. St. Martin had very few prospects. Many persons, St. Martiners, left St. Martin to go and seek a livelihood elsewhere. And it was exactly at the time that in the region, many countries coming out of colonialism was looking at their political future. Okay, what do we become now? So you had, for example, those countries, islands that would become an associated state of their former colonizers, so to speak. You had those who went straight into their independence, so it was very much a time, what do we do now? Now that we're no longer a colony, and we need to decide what kind of political structure we want. But in the case of St. Martin, not much attention was paid to that aspect, more so to building the country economically speaking. So in the early 60s, that's what you saw. St. Martin then became a thriving beacon for many in the Caribbean region itself. And that was what I just highlighted, transpired during the reign of the Democratic Party. However, like most parties of that time, one, of that longevity, two, we too as a political party confronted our challenges. And so I was a member of the party. I ran on the slate of the party. And in 1994, the late Dr. Claude Watty was experiencing his own issues, and the party and politics were secondary to what he personally was going through. And the party at that time, 1994, was basically on the brink of be non-existent. And I can remember vividly the discussion going on at the time. And it's like, who is going to stand in the gap? Who is going to take up the mantra and take this party into the next election? Because an election was upcoming. And I guess youthfulness and drive and wanting to show that I can do it. And I basically took up the leadership of the party, but at the time, not just inherited, a flourishing party, no issues, and the party was strong in terms of its membership. We had a large backing, but in terms of leadership, at that time in those years, there was a sort of, I would want to call it a leadership crisis. That's when I took on that leadership, and I have been at it in terms of politics, in terms of holding different public offices ever since.
And I think that gives such a good introduction to, how we've evolved, as a community. And can you maybe zero in on like the philosophy of the party at the time? What did the Democratic Party stand for?
Yeah. The Democratic Party, especially back then, was very socially minded, very socially, but at the same time realizing that you can be as social as you would like to, but if you don't have a certain economic drive as well, you don't have that balance. So in terms of, of course, it was much easier, the population was smaller, but embracing the population, looking at the social situation of the country, that was definitely a thrust of the party, but at the same time, creating that more economic type of a balance as well. So it was kind of a mix, and it's also a global trend that the strict classical ideologies of political parties, what you see very much now, also, for example, in the United States. So now you have, for example, parties that consider themselves conservative, right. But then you have different degrees of conservatives, right. And the liberal ones the same way, know. So I think especially in our small island politics, I think you have that a lot. So you will see tendencies. You would say, "Wow, that those tendencies are very social, or they're very conservative." Right. But then it's also interspersed with different elements as well. So
right. Yeah. As I think, like, I was having a discussion also with Kamilah, and I was saying that I feel like when we're having these conversations, it's really important to ask our MPs, like, what is the philosophy? Because sometimes it's like everybody kind of really believes in the same thing, and it's hard to see, okay, which party believes in it.
It is so true.
And I think it's a very important conversation because I see often that in our political conversations, we don't really talk about whether we're conservative or we're,
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have those conversations. Yeah. So what do we say? Oh, I am DP. I am a But what does that really mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And we don't have that conversation enough. So
it is so true. It is so true. And Leanne, it's also in terms of, you're right, a clear separation and say left and right, center, center left, center right. And those kind of discussion, they're somewhat vague, when you look at small island politics
as well. In our context, it's hard. It is so hard, like, to figure out, like, where we really stand. So I really wanted to ask that question. What did the DP stand for at that time?
And that's why it's so important to not only say what do you really stand for, but based on what it is you stand for, and as basic as that might be, to then also give an indication as to where you would like to see our island go, because then that kind of gives an idea. Oh, so that's their philosophy. Their philosophy includes, looking at everybody on St. Martin and saying, let's strengthen the St. Martin community. Let's maintain the St. Martin culture, but never you know what I'm saying? So, and those are the kind of discussions that we should be having.
Right. I and that's why I said I think that you would be the ideal person to really highlight what where we really stand, or really what philosophies we hold. I think that was really important. I think that also another thing that is important in having this conversation is, how do we say, the evolution of DP, I guess you would say, and your leadership. I think that's important also for the listeners to see, like, what was that like, taking up that leadership role, and taking it into the new era? Because you talk about doing that in the mid-90s. So how was that? Can you shed light on taking it into the 2000s? What was that like for you?
Yeah, surely. We talk about the parties. We talk about the Democratic Party, the DP, and we talk about the members. And that some persons were members because their mother and father, grandparents were. They didn't want to hear anything else, And so that was the kind of environment at the time. So you really didn't have like an official membership base and paying members, etc., which is normally the basis of a political party. It is in like the early 90s when, for example, we started to say, but we got to organize ourselves formally. And back then, the party's structure was a foundation, but a more appropriate structure for a political party is an association where you can have membership. The membership can speak, and that kind of a structure. So, and getting to that at the time, more modern structuring of the party, that was quite an exercise in those days, and you had to explain to people why it's important that we couldn't continue in the former sort of a loose way. A lot of we knew everybody who was DP, everybody who knew they were DP, but now to structure it, that was quite an exercise. So it's in those kind of days that I had just become leader of the party. We created an association. Now, there were no laws regarding political parties as such. Now there is a law regarding that as a political party, you have to register as such. Formally, I could get up and I could postulate a slate. And I could postulate it under the name of Sarah's Party. And, and there was not a particular format for a political party to be officially registered by, etc., etc. That is the case now. Since 10, we have that kind of legislation. So yes, your wording is correct in terms of definitely a political evolution. It wasn't overnight, but it definitely was. And campaigning, everything has changed over the years, over the decades. I remember in an interview that I had just yesterday on the similar topic, and I was like, back then, I mean, you could not think that you would be having a campaign and not have a public rally. That was a political sin, and you could not have mind you, our island is so small, but to say that I'm going to have a political rally in Coal Bay that will also count for Simpson Bay. No, you couldn't do that. So the campaigning was like political rally, Simpson Bay, Coal Bay, Dutch Quarter, Middle Region, and et cetera, et cetera. But all of this happening, evolving, and then technology coming in, young people getting involved in politics. So again, I want to reiterate that, so that kind of evolution. Now looking back, it's quite interesting to really, to look at that and see how far we've come as political parties.
Yeah.
I agree.
On a note, Kamilah, and Nian just asked in terms of philosophy, if I look at our basic document, so the Articles of Incorporation of the party, we talk about a social Christian party, so, but I mean, that has so many different angles that you can look at it from. So that officially, yes, is stated in the Articles of Incorporation.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's really interesting. I feel like that gave us a broad view of really what really took place between that time.
Yeah.
It really did.
It does. And then like you mentioning rallies just like open up my childhood. Like rallies was just a thing. Like, and where I used to live, I could hear every single person.
I know, right? Exactly.
So it was just like, oh, okay. DP is
they're at it.
So true. Yeah.
And it's something that the population looks forward to, because I know, for instance, my mom, and I know a lot of her friends as well, be like, I'm going to that rally in Dutch Quarter.
Yeah. That was a big thing.
It's a big thing. Like, I feel like we don't look at enough how much a rally is just not a political rally. It's a cultural thing. It's become
it's like a social event.
It is true. It is so true. It is so true. And then throw in some chicken legs and thing, and we going out.
Yes.
And again yesterday I said, and there was political jabs, fire for the lack of a better word, but it was much more good-natured than it is today. Today it sometimes can be vicious, really vicious. But fun. Don't think that those days, including myself, that we used to give the little jabs, and especially in the political rally, because that's what the people came to hear. But it was kind of good nature. I mean, you get off the stage, everybody laughs about it, and you see how But no, but it has become a much more vicious arena. Yeah.
That's interesting, because growing up, like I always used to hear it, like, in political arena, we're not that like angry or etc.
Yes, exactly.
At the end of the day, everyone still going by the bar to have a beer together at the end of the day. Exactly. So I guess seeing us transition to this more, we actually don't like each other type of politics.
I don't want to say we don't like each other. I think it's just a bit more aggressive.
Yeah. It's it's aggressive, and of course, again, social media plays a great role, because the thing was back then, okay, you have your you have your rally, you have your election, you say what you had to say, the others came back at you because of what you said or did not say, etc., etc. And after 8 days, as intriguing as the story was, 8 days and that story is over. But now you say things, you accuse your peers of things, and these things live a life of their own, not only on St. Martin, out there, and you're seeing the boomerang effect of that as well. So social media has a lot to do with it. It's a great tool to reach the larger audience. I remember it was a big thing when our public rallies could be televised live, and people could stay home and still follow the, so the cameraman would be there and he tape it, and at the same time it was being transmitted live. That was a big thing, a big step for us. But of course, social media has dwarfed that kind of a outreach, and it's much more. You reach everywhere now, and everyone reaches you.
That is very true. So I'm gonna we're going to go into our next question. So we're now talking about now present day parliament and the different discussions that's been happening. So what Nian and I we've been discussing this a lot of times in regards to the lack of capacity and human resources. So we're talking about, like, based on previous annual budgets, a significant amount is spent on education. So if that's the case, why aren't we able to build our capacity through local students and professionals on the island and abroad? So the issue with, like, island capacity, because we keep hearing it over and over and over again.
We have, and that's to St. Martin's credit, that we know a system in which most of our education and most a large degree is basically publicly funded. Publicly funded. And again, we were able to do that because of our economic situation. It's not all countries can afford to provide education, be it the primary or secondary, let alone for the studies after secondary education. But in our case, that is possible. We have never made it an issue that the persons who study on public funding, especially their university studies, must come back and help build the country. What we have done, and that is when I was in government, even before 10-10-10, is basically created an incentive package. Because remember that part of the study financing, also if you receive Dutch study financing, is a loan. So we had a policy back then that if you come back and you work, you be part of the building up of your country, your loan amount would be reduced up to a total of like 50%. But that policy, while it was there and several persons made use of it, it was not a widespread, the drive of, so do we have students out there? And several have come back. I don't think we highlight sufficiently those persons who have come back to St. Martin after going out and study and contribute to the country. I don't think we highlight it enough. And so that's one part of the equation. As I was saying before, once our students go out and study, especially in Europe, where there are no limitations in terms of you being able to work following your studies, we are basically competing with those type of offers to our students. And many of them decide, well, this is where I'm going to stay. You often hear, at least for a few years, and then I'm going to go back to St. Martin. So you also have that plays a role, students not coming back immediately. I don't necessarily think that is a bad thing. And I'll tell you why. Imagine that, okay, we send out on average and roughly about 200 students with scholarship to study abroad. Imagine after 4 or 5 years, all of these students at the same time come back and say, we're back. Here's our diploma. We're looking for a job. We would not be able to absorb that capacity for sure. So that there's a certain, kind of flexibility is good. But we need to have a human resource map. We need to have a human resource plan, where you can structure this so that we don't find ourselves having, to basically be begging and asking our students, especially, come back. Because again, there is capacity. It's out there. We, as you know, we tailor our study financing to the needs of the market. So we look at it and say, well, what are the needs? And, so from that perspective, there is a certain synchronization, but it has to be a larger master plan in terms of making sure that you can bring back the capacity, that you can build what is there. And so it has to be all part of a larger human resource master plan. And that does not come sufficiently to the forefront currently.
I agree so much with what you've said. And I think I've said this like in so many different ways, Kamilah. But and I agree that, we can't take back everyone, but it's also very disheartening to hear, like, on the floor of Parliament, we're understaffed, we cannot find persons, we have so much consultants and they're not local, and you continue to hear the same rhetoric, and you're also saying, like, there's students studying abroad, not only us studying abroad, there are persons that have grown their careers that would be really come back. Why are we not utilizing this knowledge, you know what I mean, or harnessing knowledge instead of sitting down and complaining, oh, we have so much consultants, oh, it's not a local, these are the type of things we're hearing, and that's kind of been like the buzzword or the buzzwords recently. We're understaffed, and I'm saying, like, where is the connection to education, especially during this time when we're complaining or saying we don't have. And I say to Kamilah all the time, I refuse to accept that. I refuse to accept that we don't have, what I mean?
Exactly.
We have so much people that are,
but there's a danger to that rhetoric. There's to that rhetoric in our parliament. And I'm going to be very, very frank about it. There's a danger to that rhetoric. And the danger is that too often the discussion goes into a direction about who that particular member of parliament at that particular time considers a local.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's an issue. So why would I single out one person to say, well, that person should be getting that job because I think he or she is qualified? No, we have many persons up there. And I think that's a dangerous tendency, but he who there, and then I'm judging people who are there, who are locals. And then I'm judging them and like, I don't think he's good because I know Miss X out there who could do the job. So that's, and I have spoken out against it because I honestly believe that it undermines the nation building. It undermines building our nation, bringing back our people and making everybody feel that they're part of that building up of St. Martin. The minute we start to discriminate between who I personally think is a local and you think is a local, I think we're going down a dangerous path. In addition to that, you have the issue, and this also plays a role, of the financing. So being able to pay. So we have vacancies in especially the government of St. Martin. We know what the vacancies are. I am sure with a good recruitment drive, we can match those vacancies. And other than many persons believe, maybe don't let me say maybe in the past, more so than now, in the past, you could have had a situation in government where no job is advertised, and then the next day you see somebody placed there in that position, depending on who is in government. But that process has been formalized. I wouldn't put my head on a block to say that never could happen again, but there is a process. There is a selection there, the process in terms of giving everybody a chance. There's a job vacancy. You think you match these skills, you apply. The next one who feels, and then you go through the process. So that's definitely in place. However, especially in those high-paying functions, when you get that St. Martin person and who is qualifying, who matches the skills, you're going to have to pay them what the job is worth. And the budget has constantly been an obstructing factor in getting in getting qualified persons into government. And when you have the qualified person, the process is tedious in government, long wait, frustration, and then if the person can get a job in the private sector, we have lost good persons because they're like, okay, I'm going somewhere else. And then there's so many aspects to this point that you're raising, because then you also have the issue that you have some critical vacancies, and for those maybe you don't have sufficient persons, an area that is sorely lacking in terms of having our own qualified persons in position is legislative lawyers. That's a study on its own. And making laws and taking laws from the drafting to the finalization is, because of our system, quite a cumbersome and intense process. And there are not many. We have lawyers in government. And again, we have good young lawyers having returned to St. Martin and working, but the need for legislative lawyers is huge, and when you have these good and smart lawyers just finish their studies, and if the government is kind of, but we can't, the budget ain't passed yet, and we can't hire you yet, and they get an offer, and I've seen many cases like this in the private sector, that's where they go. So to just, we don't have the capacity, and throw it on the fact that they are they are consultants that are taken on. I mean, we always need to be alert not to choose the easy way. Sometimes for a particular project or so, and for particular expertise, it is easy to take on a consultant and say, you do this project for me and deliver what it is that you have to do for your payment, and that's the end of it. But to sort of put consultants in positions that actually an employee should hold, that's and I know, and again, I'll be open and honest, and that happens sometimes, and that's where you get, that's where you get a complaint in terms of, but what is that consultant doing there? Fill the position, so while there is a need, while there can be a need for a consultant, if you don't have that big master plan in terms of how you want to build your human resources, you're going to get these ups and downs. And
interesting. I've always wanted an answer to that, or how this government or even the legislative body or MPs in general just see that, because as I mentioned, that this is rhetoric that we see constantly.
Yeah, I know.
In the social media cycle, this the small man. So you really want to know. Of course, the question was tailored to the public sector, but it is a reality for even the private sector. What So I really feel like that's a really interesting take on how we can solve that problem, or how we can look at that problem.
That's very true. So Nian, as our HR specialist, I feel like you should start working on how we can fix this. You know what I mean? I feel like I do feel like that. We're gonna have discussions after that. We're gonna be like, okay, we're gonna fix it.
Grand HR master plan. Okay, maybe.
And like, as I listen to the two of you, it is so important that our diaspora remains engaged with what is happening on St. Martin, remains engaged, have the discussion, challenge some of the things that you either heard, believe, or see that are happening, and that's also important. That linkage back and fro is also very important, again, for building up for building up.
I feel like now we're going to go slightly into the conversation that I always go through. It's the fact that we don't really, in our school system, we don't really tackle civics or understanding our political process and stuff like that. And if we talk about that, look at that. So not talk about that, but look at that on a bigger scale. It results in even who we elect. You know what I mean? Because we're not of this process,
Yeah.
And I'm always saying to Kamilah, I was like, it would be great. I don't know if we always reminisce on the fact that, in sixth grade, we had this general knowledge test and we had to know all these things. And then it kind of just stops, we don't know anything for the next 6 years. You know what I mean? And we're like, great. It would be great if we were taught this, you know what I mean? When we take CXC in third form, we do social studies, we learn about CARICOM, but why aren't we learning about, our process, what that is? Because you often hear, from our people itself, how you could be into politics. I'm like, I'm not into politics, but this stuff affects my life.
Exactly.
That's everything I do. So I need to understand. I need to, what I mean? How you get that so much, I don't understand this, and I don't believe all of them is I won't want to say corrupt or crooks, but
I know, but you often hear that kind of
rhetoric, and I was like, that's valid. I don't want to discern anybody, discern anybody saying okay, that has not happened. But I feel like we talk about involving people in our political us getting engaged. We talk about that, but it's also we don't do it in a formal way either, and the way that I've learned is also through Kamilah. I've learned by doing my own research. That's how you get to this point.
Yeah, exactly. And once there is that interest, and then you do your research, you are able to form a good opinion, and just not talk and repeat what you hear other persons saying. And again, that is so important. And and again, of course, this is let's call it Women's Week. So in addition to having received the Living Legend Award from Coalition Politics, for which I am extremely grateful. It was a surprise, and it also made me think about the issue of a legend, but we might get to that if we have some time in it, but the point I wanted to make is that, so because that's the week, I have had several interviews and talking to young people, etc., and all of this is educating, and persons have asked me, they say, but why don't you create a sort of a mentorship, an partisan mentorship? And I had to explain, and I think Leanne, it has to do with the point that you just raised in terms of having that basic knowledge as someone growing up, and to make a good and informed decision. Because what happened is, I have had those kind of sessions, in fact, I created a chapter. So under the DP's flag, I created a chapter of young professionals. Why did I do that? Because you had persons out there, whether they were working for government in the private sector, they just wanted to get a good understanding. They weren't looking to get on the list for the next election per se, but they wanted, if they do that, to have a good basis. But the thing is that, and I have had that, several persons who subsequently ran with different parties, ran with DP, left, came back, etc., have gone through that kind of a mentoring, if I can call it that. And but at the end of the day, there is no way that you can hold that person. I thought I took this up. That you can hold that person, and say, well, now that I have given you this training, you gotta put it towards the party that is doing it, because, and knowing politics and having a firm opinion about why would you want to be part of politics. And too often, that is not known. Young people jump into politics and then are frustrated because this thing about going out there and deciding, I'm running with whatever, DP, NA, you name it, any one of them. I'm going to run with them because I am going to make sure that the roads in Union Farm get fixed. But you know, once you get in there, getting the roads in Union Farm or Colby, wherever it is, fixed is not, you can do that, you know, and then many young and eager persons, they get kind of jittery, you know, like, and also the party or my faction is not doing enough. I think I can do better. And I leave and I go, and we have seen once that is possible, we have seen what has happened over the past 10 going in 11 years.
And that's what I said, like, you know, I say it to Kamilah all the time, because that's a person, like, I can just explain. A whole rant. I have a whole master on how we can fix. Anyway, but we won't go into that. But I think it's really important, and I say it to Kamilah all the time, like, if I could go back to my 6th grade education, you know, if from 6th grade to up until 3rd form, let's say, I was able to be educated on who L.B. Scott was, his contributions, what the Island Council looked like, what the Island Council meant to where we are now. Can you imagine with that? You know what I mean? And I think that we can do that in our educational system. There's not really a need. Of course, parties can do that, you know, if they want to mentor person. But I think that we can do that through our education system. And it's not going to just serve as a basis, like, oh, I want to run on a party, or I want to run on a party.
But like, at least you can make it.
Like when, you know, for instance, a big topic now, the coho, it comes in handy now when we're talking about a living wage. What does that look like on St. Martin?
Exactly.
It comes in handy when we have to vote. What does this party, you know, what does the party stand for? What does it mean? What does being a minister mean? What does an MP mean? You know what I mean? I saw I think a last, I don't know if it was the program you were on Monday, but or in Parliament, someone was saying, mentioning, you know, what does it mean? Like, people still think, oh yes, it was on your program when you got the Living Legend Award. People still think that ministers, the process of being a minister, they still don't understand that process. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's one of the big topics in our community. They don't understand the process of how people become a minister. They don't understand from how does it go from MP to minister. What does it mean to be a faction leader? What does it mean to be a chairman of a committee? You understand what I mean? And I feel like all this need to be done by a party. Like, if you can take those formative years from 6th grade to 3rd form and say, hey, this is our history. This is where we are, even up to just those years. And whatever people want to do with that knowledge, at least they can do.
Yes, exactly.
And they can have a formative conversation about, you know, what is happening in our life.
Yeah. And, you know, and our system, and
that too, the Constitution. We need to
the Constitution for sure.
Kamilah, you mentioned, I think in the bio, I used the phrase, and I said that in becoming country, we created a mosaic of theory, bits and pieces from. What did I mean with that? I meant that our laws, many of them adopted what was already there in the Netherlands and Italy. So while there are St. Martin laws, we took, for example, to give you an example of what I'm talking about, in the rules of order of Parliament has pieces that was taken over from the 2nd chamber. However, and our Constitution as well. However, these pieces, these statements, these clauses and paragraphs in the different laws and Constitution, especially when they have been taken over from the Netherlands. Remember, the Netherlands has a political history for centuries, so their system today has grown over all of that time. And I'm going to give you, but we haven't had that. We haven't had that growth in terms of our political system. So we're playing around with a system. You don't see, what do you do? Okay, let's just basically, so you, the people, elect your parliament, 15 members as it stands right now, according to our constitution. A majority, 8 or more of those members decide we together are going to form the next government. And once that is decided by 8 or more, they are what we call the coalition. Okay, so the coalition form, you should have a governing agreement. So on the basis of this, we decide to work together. You should also have a governing program. And coming back to the philosophy, where do you want to go as a coalition, as a political party? Normally, to come to that program, you put together the party manifestos where you should have certain ideologies and philosophies mentioned, and then you try to come to an understanding between the parties who form the coalition of how can you mesh those things. Okay, so fine. Let's say you got all of that. You got a governing program, and then you have a minister who goes rogue, so to speak. Who goes rogue? Okay, and the leader of the party or the prime minister calls in that minister, and the minister like, I'm doing it this way because that ministry I'm responsible for, which is a big change with the island territory days. You didn't have that kind of independence for the minister. Anyhow, so Parliament is getting upset. I'm giving an example. Parliament gets upset, but that minister should not have done that. Talk. How can that minister be called to order? Parliament can call a minister in and sort of give a warning shot. Minister, that act that you just did, we do not agree to it. Okay, maybe the minister feel that he or she still have support in Parliament, so he or she continues. And then you come, and then the Parliament gets upset. The very own coalition gets upset and decide, okay, that minister has to go. Minister has to go.
Right.
So the only way a minister can go is in our political system is via a motion of no confidence. Mm-hmm. But then there are some tricky areas in between there, because that minister's dismissal have to be done by the same government. The Parliament can dismiss the minister. You see what I'm saying? So then, and then the government, and then, so now maybe, and then maybe the ministers will then tag up and say, oh yeah, no, my minister ain't going nowhere. And Parliament say, yes, he or she must go. And then the government then decide we send in Parliament home. And that has happened over and over. And that's basically, and so how do you, and so when I refer to the Netherlands, and because there's a certain level of maturity that must be displayed on both levels. Otherwise, we will continue to have what we have been having all along. Why are a lot of people getting anxious around this time? Because we're over the 1 year mark with the government. And that's a sad thing when you think about it, that on social media and where have you, persons are like, yeah, election coming, and it's really sad, because you don't, as a government, you don't get a chance to come. First of all, you got to present a program to the people, and whether they agree with you or not, you were elected by them. You said, this is where I want to go. Look at the whole discussion that is taking place this week with respect to that petition that was filed.
We were just going into it.
This is the perfect segue into overreaching powers. I think we're going in the right direction. The train is heading in the right direction.
Yes, because I do want to say that when I woke up, it was yesterday morning. Yes, when I woke up Thursday morning, Nian was blowing up my phone, and I was like, "What is happening?"
Going on, yeah.
And she sent me like 3 different articles, and this was like 6 a.m. And I was just like, I don't know what's happening. I was like, no.
I like give me a chance to get up
because we live on 2 different time zones. But I was like, I don't care if you're
2 different time zones.
Things are happening. Like we need to talk about it.
We need to talk.
Yeah, so like the whole conversation and understanding. So okay, so I'm a political science major. So of course, like these are the things that I learned in class in regards to who handles international and foreign relations, who handles legislation, etc., how the model is different between the different worlds.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So then waking up and seeing that like Parliament sent a petition on behalf of Parliament, and it didn't came from the Minister General Affairs, who has all the foreign policy, etc. roles. That confused me a little bit. I was like, how did that happen? So of course we know you and the PFP faction both put out press releases talking about the disdain with the whole issue is happening. So if you feel free to like just dissect the whole situation. I know you can't really talk too much about the closed meeting because it was a closed meeting, but from there onwards, just the last 3 days with this colonization effort.
Yeah, yesterday, oh my God, so much has happened since that. It was really, I was like, is it only yesterday that I had this press briefing? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw it. I mean, it's kind of long, but I'm going to respond. But I think if you get a chance, just listen to some of that. It gives you a good idea exactly of what you're asking in terms of what really happened. There is this, and that's why I keep stressing, talking earlier, I kept stressing how important it is for the government and the coalition, once they decide to work together to present to the people of St. Martin, this is where we're going with you, okay? And again, you're going to get those who are in favor, maybe the supporters, and you're going to get those who are objecting to what. But you are the government. At this particular time, the government is responsible to lead us. So it's important for the people to know where are we being led to. And so we don't have, at this time, we have not yet received a governing program of the government. What happened is that you get a whole issue with the coho, which is an issue on itself. But anyhow, so we don't have a governing program, but there are some persons in the coalition. I don't get a feeling that it is the entire coalition, so all of the members, all of the ministers, but there is a group in the coalition that feels adamant about this matter of. And for the life of me, I don't understand what it is they want exactly, but that's another point. I'm constantly packing issues, probably looking for a further discussion with you guys, but not yet. So there are some who are on this decolonization drive. Now I have my own opinion on where we stand with respect to a decolonization, because I believe that we have passed that station, that we got issues in the relationship. That's another discussion. But I can't see us telling the Netherlands with a straight face, we are not yet decolonized because you are not treating us the way that we think you should treat us. That's not the discussion. The discussion is that we are part in a kingdom, should be on an equal level, politically or economically. We are actually not. We are sort of dependent on one partner, the bigger partner, and the bigger partner is looking at assisting us and putting certain conditions. Those are the issues that we're having. But coming back to the point that I'm making, so you have this issue of decolonization that has been played all the time. And the Netherlands said to the government, I ain't going there with you and your decolonization. Distance yourself from it while you're negotiating with me. The government did that late last year. Negotiations continued. Finally, the third tranche was approved, etc. However, there are those in Parliament who believe that they can continue on a separate level, not including the government, on the level of Parliament to pursue this particular course. And again, my opinion, it can't work like that. You are the government. Yes, part of you are in the government and part is in the Parliament. Together you make up the coalition, but you can't, who are you fooling by having the government say, we're not in that, we're distancing ourselves. You, the Parliament, when the government asks you, you sent a letter to the Dutch government, to the state secretary, and you told the state secretary, as Parliament, you told them, we support the government in going after the coho and the liquidity, etc., etc. Right. Now, so that's what happened, and everybody felt, whoa, we got at least some time to kind of, get our ducks in a row. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then there was those in Parliament who go behind the decolonization, who are going behind the decolonization. They made a motion, and the motion was of the 5th of November, 2020, which in my opinion was neither here nor there. I told them this, I did not support the motion. I am dead serious. And, and I didn't support the motion because I honestly didn't see the logic. I didn't see where it could bear fruit. That was my issue. And anyhow, and then they decided they're going to create a decolonization committee of Parliament. And I supported that, but I said, decolonization, whatever you, the others, understand on it, could never be an end. Decolonization would be a means, but where do we want to get? And just to show you what I meant with that, today now, because of the petition, you have Dutch politicians who are saying to the Dutch government, give St. Martin its independence, because they feel that the end of this trajectory, what St. Martin wants is independence. That's what they read into it. But the government, nor those in Parliament who are proponents of decolonization, have told us what they really understand. I've asked them, and I've put it like this. Fill in for me, please. Just how I'm saying to the two of you, I say, fill in for me, please. Those of you who feel this is a course to take, I say, fill in the following for me, please. We want to be decolonized, and we believe this is what needs to be done. They refer to all kinds of UN charters, they refer, but not telling me, what do you want? So you're going to tell the Netherlands, put us back on the list of non-self-governing territories? So now make us a colony, because when we were a colony and you come up with the structure of the charter, you didn't do everything that you were supposed to do. So by going back to where we were, that's going to propel us forward. I can't see that. But anyhow, so committee was created, and I said, guys, decolonization is not an end. And grudgingly, they then decided to call the Committee for Constitutional Affairs. I said, this thing is larger, and decolonization. And I said, well, committee was created. Committee met after appointing its chair and vice chair for the first time last week, Wednesday. Last week, Wednesday, first time. And the committee, basically, and the reason why the chair lady said it was a closed door was because she wanted to set out the parameters for the workings of the committee. Okay, I disagreed, but that's her prerogative. And then half an hour before that meeting started, we get in our inbox a petition filed on behalf of the Parliament and the citizens of St. Martin to the special rapporteur of the Committee for Racism, Xenophobia, Intolerance, and the whole long name, and the work group for African, the work group that they have looking at the development of especially African countries, etc. And so the question was, we just started in a committee where we're supposed to be having dialogue. We're not going to agree on everything, but at least to talk about it. That's what a parliamentary committee is all about. Mm-hmm. Talk about it. So before we make a decision, we talk, we discuss, we disagree, etc., etc. But then, so while the committee is following this process, then you have a process outside of the committee, totally unknown to the committee, in which a petition like that was filed. And those who filed the petition say they do it on behalf of the chairman of parliament and based on the motion of November the 5th of 2020. And I'm like, something ain't right here. Something is not right here. And that's what created the whole issue, and everybody. And then when you see the language that is used in this petition so-called on behalf of the parliament and the citizens, that is why I was so agitated, and which was evident in the press briefing that I had yesterday. I like, you don't do this for me, not as a member of parliament and not as a citizen, without expecting that I would say something. Mm-hmm. So that's a big issue right now. And now the government has been put in a spot because the government is there and saying, okay, right now for us, priority is securing the financial economic well-being of the country. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to get this kind of a side trajectory that now has those in the Netherlands up in arms. They have, so that's what in a nutshell.
It's true. So I know we talk about a lot of they sent this on behalf of not only Parliament, but behalf of the people of St. Martin. And I know you mentioned this in your press release because we actually watched it earlier. And we were like, is this the perfect time for us to have another referendum on what's the thought process of the people of St. Martin? And if so, how should that be executed per se?
Yeah, I'll first give you my answer to the question regarding is this the right time for a referendum? And then I'll explain why I now have rethought that and say I think we should do it. Firstly, I believe that this is not a time to go and burden the people of St. Martin with a question regarding, where do you want to go politically? I honestly do not believe that that's the time, because a good referendum requires good preparation and participation. We don't want to organize a referendum with everything that comes with it, and 25% of the population actually gives an opinion. And even when, because in 2017-18, you had this petition that came to Parliament, was discussed in Parliament to hold a referendum by the Independence for St. Martin Foundation. So you had a foundation that came to Parliament. My position at the time was, I don't think I understand that, and I believe any constitutional decision must be taken to the people. But I don't believe now, even less in the midst of this pandemic, that the timing for that we should take our focus off what it should be on and have a referendum. However, so that has been my standpoint regarding the timing of a referendum. However, when I look at what transpired and what I believe a majority in Parliament wants to do, so to actually put us to face a fait accompli in terms of what our political future would be. And then I was like, no, this that happened with this petition should not have happened without it being put to the people. And the sad truth is that a majority in Parliament could try these type of stunts. That's what I called it in the press briefing, and that's what I believe it is. Tried a stunt. And so I have stated two things. I said, because now the government is under tremendous pressure. And I said, I publicly called on the Prime Minister to find out from St. Martin people, firstly, so just in a survey, no formal referendum, what are the matters that matter to them now? What are the issues that matter to the St. Martin people right now? With so many of our men and women out of a job, with so many, persons, going where they can receive food baskets and food vouchers. And so I say, government, what I think you should do is find out. Don't take it from me if I'm saying I don't think that a referendum is on the people's mind. And secondly, I'm saying before any other decision regarding our constitutional future is made, a referendum must be held. And those were my two items in terms of, calling out and saying we cannot continue in this manner. What are we going to wake up tomorrow and hear that a select few in the parliament did based on this motion that was issued on the 5th of November, 2020, which according to the president of parliament has given him a carte blanche in terms of contacting who he wants, getting them to send petition on behalf of, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. I think for our listeners as well to know what it looks like on the ground and how this decision really affects their lives, because I feel like it's important to bring it a bit, back to how it affects, St. Martin's lives. The reality that, our government is in the process of securing financing for,
correct,
to maintain our community, our population, you know what I mean, with the Netherlands. And it was in that moment, you can only think, or the person, looking at this, reading these things can only think, what are the repercussions of this? I think that is the first thing any regular person on the street right now that is going through their jobs, they're not really thinking of, what happened, what article got written. I really feel like people are thinking, how does it really affect my life? And I think how it really affects their life is that this food basket program or any aid that they were receiving from the SSRP, what is that risk like in a month, 2 months, 3 months? You know what I mean? I think that's important for our listeners or anybody who's just, to understand what that looks like in the eyes of a St. Martin right now. That is the reality, that this is at risk. I know that, this article was written. I know that Parliament is having this discussion, these committees, all of that aside, this is the reality for us.
Exactly. And I couldn't agree with you more. And, and when you have, let me kind of sum up your statement, your concern in the following way. After a lot of tug and war regarding agreeing to the conditions for the third tranche, in December, the Prime Minister signed off with the State Secretary Knops this agreement that contained the country package as well as the commitment to the commitment for financial assistance. And the conclusion in that agreement states, and I paraphrase, that if there is no longer support for the COHO, or if support for the COHO law is retracted, that the agreement on the country package and the liquidity assistance is null and void. Okay, that's part of that's the agreement. And by the way, any of these documents that I mentioned, if you have not yet seen them or had them and would like to peruse them, just let me know, so that you can have them and go through them at your leisure. But that's what that document states. So to now see a petition on behalf of the people of St. Martin that says in its conclusion to force the Dutch government to terminate the COHO draft law, you're saying, in other words, that petition is basically telling the Dutch government terminate the assistance to St. Martin. That's what you're saying.
Because
that's what you're saying.
Articles coming out of, these different parliamentarians in the Netherlands, that there's like that the assistance should stop until we make a decision.
Yes, exactly.
And
exactly.
I think that's so scary, just so scary to think about, because when you think about it, not, as I said, not on a governmental level at all. You guys can sort that out. However,
at some point we will.
Of course, we are interested how it all pans out. But as a person on the ground right now that may have lost their jobs, that are on these food voucher programs, that or receiving unemployment from the development fund, that is hard to hear. Economic activity, that is hard to hear.
It is. It is.
And I want to know, I think one of the key things that I want to know from MPs, how are you going to, not even MPs, but the government or in the whole, both
especially the government,
how are they going to be able to
deal with that,
communicate this to people, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree.
And this is all amid us doing a vaccine program. You know what I mean? I feel like there's so much
trying to convince persons to not pay attention to all the fake news and the fake stories and the fear mongering regarding the vaccines. Yes, nothing in life is without risks, but to make it seem as if the vaccine program on St. Martin is basically to wipe out the St. Martin population. I mean, that's taking it a little too far as well. And so I mean, not only are we rolling out a vaccine program, but you also got these issues regarding the program that you want to combat, that you want to, get out of the way so that people can be vaccinated. And then on top of that, you have that. But Kamilah and Leanne, I'm looking at the time, and I know we could probably go on until tonight, I'm sure.
For sure. We probably can, honestly. But I do just have one, I guess, last statement on everything. Like Nian mentioned, of course, this should be very interesting as you just a regular person, just trying to figure out how this affects your process, etc. But then this opens, like, I guess it's an open-ended question to like the public. And you're like, how does the government do public relations control and negotiation control over all of this? I kind of feel for the Council of Ministers right now, because I know you got to go through a whole process. Like, okay, we got to do this. No, like that whole just confusion.
Exactly. Like someone, like a person commented following my press briefing, you don't have to tell the Prime Minister, you shouldn't be telling the Prime Minister what to do. Okay, she get herself into this, etc. And I'm like, but you realize it's the people of St. Martin. The the persons ultimately affected are the people of St. Martin. And I can imagine what the Prime, and I said it on Monday, I said it on other days, I can imagine what the Prime Minister is going through. Been there, done that. But it is a situation that I don't know now that the ball has been cast, how the die has been cast rather. How we going to solve it? How we going to get out of it? How are we going to get out of it with a straight face? That's my question. No.
I think one of the last questions that I have is like, does Parliament have any intentions, or the factions, or your faction have any intentions of, holding a meeting, discussing this in public with, on the floor of Parliament, like discussing this at all?
In fact, all of this, we had called in the Prime Minister, to have a discussion about the country package, what is stated in the country package, and that meeting started, and the meeting isn't even finished yet. In fact, hopefully, but I guess with all that happened, it might not go ahead. But hopefully, the continuation of that meeting is next week. But then, it it loses its. So we're going to talk about, the country package and whether we should go left or right on this item. But in the meantime, you have this happening. So you really ask yourself, are we not engaging and hearing some of the claims by Dutch politicians now following this petition? And then you're asking, are we engaging in futility? And, by is the country package at some point going to be hung up somewhere until Knops can get satisfaction regarding what happened? You know what I'm saying? I mean, you call the people racist and say that they're trampling our human rights. So, would it surprise anyone if they say, well, okay, I'm pulling my hands off of this. I am not going to be accused of you trampling. I'm not going to be accused of trampling your human rights. I mean, I said it and I believe it that by this act, those who are behind it, those from Parliament who are behind it, have gotten themselves in way over their heads. I know it's a harsh statement, but that's what I feel.
Yeah, right. That's the reality of things. So I guess as we wrap up this episode, we like to end on a lighter note. Like it's, we always get so deep at the end, and then we're like, okay, light note.
I know, right?
So I know, like, I don't think I mentioned it in your bio, but I think most people back home in St. Martin do know that you created and started the You Too Can Move, right? This organization. So I just want to know, like, what inspired you to do it, and like how persons back home can get involved with it, despite with COVID, etc.
I started that movement when I was prime minister. And I mean, it was quite a basic decision to a very strong feeling that I have regarding health, women's health in particular. And the fact that an important part of our healthcare is being active. Being active, whatever it is you can do, your bodies are meant to move. And like I jokingly say in the group of You Too Can Move, whether you creep, you crawl, you walk, you run, whatever it is you do, but do something. Keep your body moving, especially sitting on its own is an issue for our body. That's a proven fact. And so anyhow, so I was like, oh my God, all of these women in government especially, and every day, and like I am sure that, by the time work is over, they go home and they're tired and they got to take care of their families, and by the time you look at it, it's time for your bed. And then I say, what we're going to do, ladies? We're going to have some Zumba classes. We're going to have some fitness classes, and we're going to stop. You are allowed as a woman. Men could have participated too, but the focus was on women. And you are allowed on Fridays. We're going to stop an hour early. And we're going to go and we're going to have our Zumba classes. We started it in the back of the old administration building in the parking lot. That's where we started. And when we didn't have enough space there, then we actually came to the front of the building. So everybody was like, oh my gosh, and that's all she likes is Zumba. And those back then, that was the thing. And but imagine that is now 9 years ago, and You Too Can Move is still alive and kicking. I am so encouraged by the group of women, young and old, tall and thin, everybody understanding and wanting to get at least that little hour a day. We have classes, we call it, like 4 times a week, and you have women who religiously come there. And it's not about whether you can dance or not dance. Like Kioma was saying to me on her program yesterday, that's not for her. She lacks coordination. We laughed at it, but and I'm like, well, I said, by you doing whatever you do, so-called out of coordination, that might be a new dance in the future, because it's just that, but the thing is about moving, and it has evolved from dance as such, to basically more fitness, and we do different things. We walk, we even, especially because of the pandemic, I looked at all of the women in You Too Can Move, and then I see some make juice and make, and I like, guys, we're going to showcase what it is that you can do. So forget about the moving part for a moment. And we had such a session, and having everybody, you do something. Are you good at cooking? Okay, you cook something. Do you cater? Bring some of your snacks, sell them. And it turned out to be a lovely event, and they are clamoring for a next one like it. So I think, in addition to where it started, as please be active and stuff like that. Look out for your health, do the checks that you need to take. And then it has also become a way of where women can get together, be themselves. It doesn't matter, when you get tired, you stop for a moment, so that can, no pressure at all. Can come the next day, then you come the first. So, and for a nominal fee. And that's only to give our instructors something. They're not even, I can't consider them being paid. We just give them something. And following the pandemic, we had to go back out in the open. We usually do it at John Lamini. We now do it in the courtyard at John Lamini, just to make sure we still try some kind of social distancing, but it continues.
And how can people reach out to join?
On a day, on any Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, if you come to the John Lamini Center a little before 5:30, when we actually get started, and you register, low threshold, and yeah.
Is
there any, like, I was gonna ask, is there like any social media or along that line as well, like any social media or Facebook or something?
Yes, we do have a Facebook page. You two can move. Yeah, you and the number 2 can move. Mm-hmm. Yeah, letter U, number 2, and can move. Yeah,
that's great. So if you're back home in St. Martin, make sure to check it out. Make sure you move.
Yeah, check out the Facebook page. That's a good idea. Exactly. Let's see what all we do.
Exercise,
and yeah, exactly.
Is there any?
I might take.
Okay, go.
You go. You go. No, you go. You go.
Finish it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was just gonna wrap up. That's why, like, if there's like any other way they can contact you personally as an MP.
Yeah. You call the Parliament building, and yes, and so that's quite easy as well. And I think my number is on Parliament's website as well.
Okay. Are there remarks you would like to share with our listeners or St. Martin in general or globally?
I want to use the opportunity to commend both of you for basically providing this opportunity for, persons on St. Martin and not on St. Martin, from St. Martin, and having that kind of dialogue, having that discussion, sharing your concerns. And I think we should do it more often. Hold your representatives accountable. That doesn't mean, going at them and, no, could you come like you did? And that's why I commended you. Could you come and talk to us for a while? You know what I'm saying? That was your question. Come and talk to us. These are the things we see, we read, we hear, and we need you to talk directly to us. And I think more persons should go about their concerns for our island in a way like this. So that's my encouragement to you to continue, and to others as well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here. So thank you guys for listening to episode 7 of the We Talkin Podcast. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.